Echoes of Autumn. In the quiet town of Maplewood, where the streets were lined with golden trees every fall and the wind always carried a whisper of old secrets, lived a young woman named Alara. She worked as a librarian in the town's historic library, a place where the scent of old paper and warm coffee lingered in the air. Alara loved the quiet rhythm of her life, finding comfort in the stories she read and the quiet hum of the turning seasons. But even the most peaceful hearts sometimes yearn for something more, a story of their own. One rainy afternoon, as the sky wept softly over Maplewood, a stranger walked into the library. His name was Aidan, a travel writer who had recently returned to his hometown after years of wandering. He had dark eyes that carried the weight of distant places, and a smile that looked like it had been forgotten for too long. He came in asking for books on forgotten places and hidden legends, and Alara, ever curious, offered to help. Their hands brushed as they reached for the same worn volume, The Forgotten Towns of Northwood Forest. It was such a small touch, yet it sent a strange warmth through her chest. From that moment on, Aidan came every afternoon. He claimed it was for research, but he always seemed to linger longer than necessary. Alara noticed the way he'd smile at her when she talked about myths and folklore, and the way he'd bring her coffee, always just the way she liked it. As the days grew shorter and the leaves turned amber, so too did their conversations grow deeper. Aidan spoke of his travels, the loneliness of hotel rooms, and the silence between flights. Alara shared her dreams, of writing a novel, of visiting places she had only read about. One chilly evening in late October, as they sat beneath the old oak behind the library, Aidan finally asked, "Have you ever thought of leaving Maplewood?" Alara looked up at the sky, then at him. "Sometimes," she whispered. "But it's not the place I'd leave behind. It's the people." He reached for her hand. "Then come with me. Not forever. Just for a chapter." Her heart trembled. She had never been brave. But love has a way of giving wings to even the most grounded soul. So she said yes. They spent the next year traveling together, from the misty hills of Ireland to the sun-drenched coasts of Greece. Aidan wrote articles, Alara filled notebooks with stories and poems inspired by the places they touched. They laughed in Paris under the rain, danced in Barcelona's silent streets, and watched the northern lights in a village where time stood still. Eventually, though, they returned to Maplewood. Not because they were tired of traveling, but because they had realized something. Their journey wasn't about the places, but the person beside them. Back in town, Alara finally wrote her first novel, a love story born from the pages of her life. Aidan published a travel memoir titled Where the Heart Stops Wandering. And every autumn, they would sit under the same oak tree behind the library, watching the golden leaves fall, and remember the chapter that began with a simple touch of hands. Their love story wasn't the kind that burned fast and bright, it was the kind that echoed through seasons, quiet and enduring, like the soft rustle of pages in an old book. The Wind and the Willow. In a quiet countryside village nestled between golden wheat fields and rolling hills, there lived a young woman named Alara. She was a painter, known for her gentle spirit and the way she captured the soul of nature on canvas. Every morning, she would sit beneath an old willow tree by the riverbank and paint the rising sun, the whispering wind, and the soft reflections dancing on the water. One autumn morning, as the mist still clung to the grass, a stranger arrived in the village. His name was Aidan, a quiet, thoughtful man who had been traveling for months in search of inspiration for his writing. He carried a leather-bound notebook filled with half-written poems and broken stories. Their first meeting was by accident. Alara, lost in her art, didn't notice Aidan approaching and spilled paint across her canvas. He apologized, though it wasn't his fault, and offered her a shy smile. She smiled back, not knowing that in that moment, the wind had shifted, and so had her life. Aidan returned the next day, and the next, always finding a reason to be near the willow tree. At first, they spoke little. He would sit nearby, scribbling in his notebook while Alara painted. Silence settled comfortably between them, like an old friend. Slowly, conversations bloomed, about books, about dreams, about the stars and the colors of the sky. One evening, as golden light poured through the leaves, Alara asked, "Why do you come here every day?" Aidan looked at her, his eyes reflecting the setting sun. "Because the words flow when I'm near you." Their friendship deepened into something unspoken but undeniable. They weren't just sharing a space, they were sharing their souls. Alara painted Aidan's silhouette against twilight skies, and Aidan wrote poems about the way her laughter danced on the wind. But Aidan had come from far away, and the road still called to him. One crisp winter morning, he told her he had to leave. "There are still stories I need to find," he said, his voice heavy. Alara's eyes brimmed with tears, but she nodded. "Then promise me you'll return." "I will," he whispered, brushing her hair back. "No matter how long it takes." Years passed. Seasons came and went. Alara waited by the willow tree, painting the sky, the river, and the empty space where Aidan once sat. Letters came now and then, carried by travelers. They were filled with verses and memories, but never a promise of when he'd return. Still, Alara believed. One spring morning, as cherry blossoms fluttered through the air, Alara sat beneath the willow tree as she always did. The wind picked up gently, carrying the scent of wildflowers. She looked up, and there he was. Older, a bit wearier, but with the same eyes that once promised to return. Without a word, Aidan sat beside her. He opened his notebook and placed a worn page in her lap. On it, a single line. "Every story I found led me back to you." Tears spilled from Alara's eyes as she smiled. The willow tree swayed above them, the river sang softly, and at last, the wind and the willow were together again.